What's up everybody, this is Ven, and I welcome you to the MOC Spotlight, where we take apart what you build. For today's episode, we'll be going over the Zyglak, created and posted on our message boards by The Wanderer. Now, before we go in depth about this reimagined character, let me remind you about my method of reviewing, which involves a point system that is based on 3 fundamental attributes: the overall appearance of the MOC, the build of the MOC itself, and the concept and ideas behind the MOC's creation. Each quality will mount up to 5 points, leading up to a final score that will be determined at the end of the episode, and please remember that this is all based on my opinion. So let's get this started. First off, I gotta say, I'm already a fan of how this thing looks. I mean, I always did like the design of the original Zyglak from G1 BIONICLE, which, for those who don't know, was a combiner model comprised of 3 different sets: Tacadox, Pridak, and Kalma. If you had these 3 sets, you'd be able to build this crazy looking, cool looking, weird looking thing. And now that we have a good bit of context as to what this thing is supposed to be, I can easily say I like what I'm looking at. Although immediately I find something that I don't really like, and it's this staff. The staff is just really plain and basic. You know, there's really not much to it. It just kind of stands out because the rest of the creation looks really good. Really well thought out and well designed and all that jazz. I especially love this whole back part with the tail just kind of stretching all the way from the head. Like, I don't know, it just looks really cool to me. And it's so smooth and well done. It's got these spikes on it. Yeah, really neat. I also like the decision in keeping at least the end of the tail orange and not making the whole tail like overwhelmingly orange, because that was something that looked a little off in the original design. It was like everything else had this consistent color scheme, and then you got this big orange tail. And while one could say that the inclusion of orange here is still an inconsistency, at least it's not overbearing. It's just here in this one spot. Just imagine if the Zyglak had like a beauty mark on it or something, you know? He doesn't have freckles, he just has one big mole on his butt. But yeah, no, I definitely enjoy the plated, like, aesthetic of the back. Now, when it comes to the front, I definitely gotta say, just starting from the ground up, the feet look really cool. I mean, pretty basic. Again, the builder retains something from the original design. It's that making the feet like silver claws. I just felt like pointing that out because that's another thing I really like. However, moving upwards towards the MOC, the coloration is definitely on point. However, the aesthetic can be said to be quite bland. It's mostly just smooth, like shells on top of bones, and, you know, fairly simplistic, nothing all too complex or crazy impressive or anything, but it still looks really nice and clean, and, you know, overall it looks pretty good. No major complaints I can really make here. I do like these parts that kind of arch over the torso. I think that adds to the aesthetic a little bit more. It would have been nice to have a little bit of that throughout the rest of the MOC, you know, just kind of adding these subtle details. And then moving further upward, closer to the head, we can see that there's a bit more complexity in this black part, which kind of gives the illusion that there's like some black mechanical being under all this armor. And then the head itself is pretty much the same head from before, with a couple of modifications, like the eyes were arranged differently, and there's the inclusion of a tongue, which I really like. That's a nice little detail to add there, quite fitting. And then there's a few extra parts that, you know, kind of connect the head to the rest of the body, and then there's this transition to the spine, which is another reason why I like the design of the spine or back and everything, because it extends the coloration of the head, whereas the original design didn't really have all too much white. This version spreads the white further down the MOC, kind of balancing the color scheme here a little bit more. Speaking of which, I would like to see a little bit more Metro Blue on this MOC. I know there aren't too many Metro Blue parts available in CCBS, but still something could have been added here, because this is the only part of the color scheme that just isn't balanced all too well. And I guess the same could be said for the orange tail, but again, it's just one of those things. At least it goes with the red. The Metro Blue, just in just this one small area, doesn't really work all too well. But yeah, that's all I have to say in that matter. As far as the build goes, this MOC holds up pretty well. As I mentioned earlier, it is mostly just the typical CCBS connections with the shell attached to the bone. You make this really simple build, you know, typical orthodox skeletal structure. with the CCBS bones and everything. But what I do like is that there are some creative elements to the build as well, such as this long spine that travels down the MOC, kind of playing around with what CCBS has to offer. And then there's this weird, complex cluster over here in the neck, which I'm guessing is simply just connecting this spine and the head to the body. And then this kind of follows the spine as it goes down the rest of the torso. And then we can kind of just really barely see a little bit more complexity here in the build. But aside from just these little things, the MOC is, for the most part, a fairly basic build that does its job really well. And we have a good bit of articulation thrown into this build as well. We have an articulated jaw. We have all the usual points of articulation: shoulders, arms, knees, this, that, and the other thing. We have articulated fingers. We have articulated tail. We have articulated tongue. We have articulated eyes. We have articulated toe claw thingies. We have all these options of articulation given in such a basic build for a MOC. I think that's a big plus. One thing that I feel wasn't built really well: the staff. I have nothing more to say on this matter. Moving on to the concept. So as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of this MOC is that it's supposed to be a reimagining of the Zyglak character from original BIONICLE lore. And according to the lore, the Zyglak were once Matoran that were then turned into these savage-looking beasts. And the builder's goal was to not only create the Zyglak, but also capitalize on its unique appearance and really add to it, which explains this nice looking spine and everything, because he wanted to make it look a lot more alien and just kind of retain that weirdness that the original design had in a newer way. And I like it. I think the goal was well achieved, and sure, maybe a few more details would be nice, like here on the torso, it kind of looks a little flat, and I did have some other complaints about this MOC, mostly with this staff design that, But those are just small things that I feel could probably be easily fixed in the future. But as it stands right now, this MOC looks great, very accurate and representative of the original design. Perhaps maybe a little too accurate with the head, because I know some would say that he could have done something a little bit more unique and not cookie cutter or anything up here, but I think this is fine. I'd kind of like to think of it as, say, if a Tahu revamp used the same mask as the original Tahu, just to kind of ensure that it's the same character, I guess. Now, one thing that I believe would really add to it in terms of being a Zyglak would be the addition of some transparent blue, because that's what the original Zyglak design had. And as you can see, this design doesn't have anything. All the colors are solid, and I feel that the addition of the transparent blue, not only would this be a bit more accurate to the original design, but it would also add a little bit more flair to the MOC and kind of give the illusion of detailing, since the MOC as it stands right now is just all smooth and kind of lacking in texture. I don't know, maybe adding in that transparent blue, just retaining that in the legs and the arms and such, could add that bit of depth and texture to it. Just a thought. Not sure how it would really look in execution, but it's an idea. Transparent blue bones and shells do exist. And that's all I have to say on that matter. So, let's move on to the final scores. In terms of appearance, this MOC receives a 3.5 out of 5. While this is a really great looking MOC, it also looks as though someone took the original Zyglak and just kind of rubbed it against sandpaper until it was buttery smooth. It's very true to its original design, while also making creative additions such as these new claws, the legs actually looking like legs, and this awesome looking spine tail thing. Aside from those things, nothing all too much is different from the original design. The same colors are used, the same head design is pretty much there. And I know it's supposed to look like an updated form, but the number of updates in this MOC is kind of minimal when you really get down to it. Also, that weapon's kind of meh. As far as the build goes, I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's a pretty good build, and with a couple of creative decisions thrown into the mix that are quite simple, yet effective. but still fairly simple. However, I do enjoy the fact that this MOC has so many points of articulation. I think that really adds to the potential of this MOC as a playable figure thing. I bet it'd be pretty fun to mess around with this and put it into a couple of poses. But aside from that, there's nothing really all too crazy I can really praise. Well, I am glad to see that it's a really solid build. Good job. And as far as the concept goes, I think this MOC deserves a 4 out of 5. I think the goal was really well achieved. It looks like an updated Zyglak. It looks better than the original design, in my opinion. I definitely feel that it improves the original design and makes the colors more consistent and all that. But in the end, I can't help but feel that something's kind of missing. Maybe it's the lack of creativity in the weapon, or the lack of texture on the torso and other parts of the body, or possibly the lack of transparent blue, or maybe even the lack of dark blue in anywhere else besides the lower part of the legs. It definitely feels like there's room for improvement. Even though I kind of like the execution as it is, it still looks like a work in progress. So, now we tally it all up, and we are left with a final score of 11 out of 15. Congratulations to you, the Wanderer. Pretty decent MOC you have here, and I do hope to see more out of you. Thank you for posting on the message boards. Now, the rest of you should follow suit. If you'd like a higher possibility of having your own creation featured on the MOC Spotlight, post it on our message boards under the LEGO Creations category, and you can find our message boards at board.ttvpodcast.com. Just post it there, and you'll automatically have a higher possibility because, I check that place out all the time. This is my go-to place for finding MOCs to throw up on the Spotlight. So, take a look, take it into some consideration at least, and if not, well, I'll see you all next time.